Guys, I was able to get my permanent residency here in Canada through the Atlantic Immigration Program. Now, for those who have been following my story, I came into Canada as a student in the year 2022. I graduated in May of 2023, and I um I got my postgraduate work permit in August, and I began my PR process in October. Let's just say October. Yeah, that's when I began my PR process. So I'm going to be taking us through the steps on how I was able to achieve my permanent residency, and I would be showing us the information on the IRCC portal, and I will be explaining how I was able to infuse all of these steps into my application and how it worked for me. So, guys, I got my permanent residency, like the whole thing, my PR card and everything by May of this year. Um, the whole process started in October. No, the whole process started sometimes in September, and then I submitted my application for permanent residency in October. I got an acknowledgement of receipt, and I went for a biometrics in December. So we start counting from December, that is when they picked up my application. So if we start counting from December up until May, so that's roughly about 6 to 7 months, and I was able to get my permanent residence. So guys, this is the IRC portal, and this is the steps. These are the steps that are involved. So first thing is who can apply. So you can check to see if you're eligible to apply. Then the next is get a job offer. So this program, that's the Atlantic Immigration Program, is employer driven. So you need to get a job with a designated employer. We'll get to that point. Now, get your documents ready, then apply for permanent residency. Guys, it's as easy as that. Now, for those who are outside Canada, this is where is applicable to them. You can then apply for a temporary work permit. You see, it's optional because it's for those who are outside of Canada. And want to come into Canada before their PR is finalized, right? So they have to apply for a temporary work permit. Then they follow these other steps after you apply, what you're to expect and everything. Then, if approved, what you're to expect. So I will be taking us on these steps. So the first one is who can apply, and this is it. It says here that to be eligible for the Atlantic Immigration Program, you must have a qualifying work experience unless you are an international graduate of a recognized postgraduate institution in the Atlantic Canada. Now, there are two parts. I love to tell people who ask me questions about the Atlantic Immigration Program. I love to tell them that there are two streams under this pathway. There's the work experience, and there is the international graduates. Now, the major difference between the work experience and the international graduates is the fact that if you're an international graduate, you must study at least 2 years in the province. So you must study a program that is 2 years or more, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years for you to qualify under the international graduate stream. And also, within that 2 years or more, you must have lived in the province for at least 16 months during the 2 years before you graduate. That is one of the major, those are two of the major differences between the skilled worker, which is the work experience, and the international graduate. So I'll just run us through uh the work experience requirements. So I used the work experience stream. I used the work experience stream because, as you all know, I studied a 1 year program in Nova Scotia. So I had more than this 15, 60 hours. So for you to qualify in the last 5 years, you must have worked at least 15, 60 hours. Now, that 15, 16 hours, it doesn't matter if you worked in Canada or outside Canada, right? So my 15, 16 hours were from back home in Nigeria. And what does this equate to? It equates to if you're working 30 hours a week, 30 hours per week, in it means you'd have worked 30 hours per week in 1 year. That's basically what would give you this 15, 60 hours. So I think that's pretty achievable, in my opinion, because from back home, minimum work hours back home is 40 hours per week, which I know that some of us we do work more than that per week. So these are the hours that can count towards your 15, 60 hours. Now, the work experience, the work you should have been doing, should be in either tier 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Tier 5 doesn't qualify. Now, for tier 2, you are required at least 2 years of the college of or apprenticeship. You have to read all of this. If your situation falls under tier 2, then tier 3, you have to read this also. But these are the knock codes. These are the tiers, right, that are eligible. Tier 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think there's tier 5, and tier 5 is not eligible. Anyways, so um for the international graduate pathway, that one, so you don't need any work experience at all. So now, which are the Atlantic province? The Atlantic province are New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. I hope I'm getting that correct. So the first now that we know the first requirement under who can apply, the next requirement is work experience. So now, the next one is educational requirement. So for educational requirements, you must have at least 1 year post secondary education or its equivalent, right? So if you've studied a 1 year program, a 1 year post secondary program or more, maybe your BSc, your master's, and all of that, they qualify. So all you just have to do is if you studied outside Canada, you should ensure that you um you do an evaluation, right? And the to get the bodies that can evaluate your credential, you can just click on this link and it will take you to the bodies. So these are the organizations that you could use to evaluate your credentials. So we have um, Comparative Education Services, University of Toronto of Continuous Service, of Continuous Studies. We have the International Credential Assessment Service of Canada. We have WES, which is one of the popular one, which is World Education Service, and that is what I used because for my educational background, I have BSc, I have a master's, and then I studied a 1 year postgraduate program in Canada. But I already had West before I began all this process because I was in the express entry pool before coming into Canada. But that's another story for another day. So I already had that evaluated, but you if you study in Canada, you don't necessarily need to evaluate any of your credentials because your education in Canada as long as it's a post-secondary education for 1 year or more, at least 1 year or more, yes, it qualifies. So yes, these are the designated body. And for architectures, for doctors, for pharmacists, this is it. So everything we need, guys, is actually on the IRCC portal. So I don't see a reason why we need to, give an agent, except if you're giving a regulated immigration consultant your application to work through with you. That's the only one I sign up to. But giving an agent um who is not regulated, guys, a lot of people have fallen victims. Anyway, guys, the next we're going to be looking at is the language requirements. So, for the language requirement, what is required is a benchmark, a Canadian language benchmark for if your tier falls under tier 0, 1, 2, or 3, we need a benchmark of 5. And if it's tier 4, you need a benchmark of 4. Which, guys, honestly, this is pretty achievable. I would link in the description box how you can calculate um your language benchmark. That's if you do your CELPIP, your IELTS, or if you do the French, I think that is called the TEF. I'm not really sure what that is called, but and then you could also use I think now they use Pearson. I'm not sure about that also, but yes, guys, um for the language requirement, this is what is required for the language. And then finally, the settlement fund. So settlement fund basically just has to do with how much you require for this pathway, what you your proof of fund, what you need to show as your proof of fund. And guys, trust me, the proof of fund under this pathway is one of the um I don't want to say the cheapest, but it's one of the most achievable or affordable, because for a family of one, if you're one person, this you need like 3,672 Canadian dollars for one person, which if you're going through the express entry pathway, that's maybe if you're going through the federal skilled worker or Canadian experience class or all of that, I think it's way more than this. But anyway, guys, this is the minimum amount of money you would need to graduate. You would need to immigrate to Canada based on the size of a family. So for one person, this is it, two, and all of that. Right? Okay. So now that we now know who can apply, the next step is getting a job offer, because as I said earlier, this program is employer driven. So you need to get a job offer. So now you figured out that okay, I qualify for all of these. Okay, now how do I get a job offer? So guys, to get a job offer, you need to seek an opportunity with a designated employer. So, to get an opportunity with a designated employer, you need to know who are the employers that are designated under this pathway for which province you want to immigrate to. For me, I would say if you're inside Canada or outside Canada and you're considering this pathway, don't just focus on one of the province. If you can apply to all of the provinces, like employers in all of these provinces, guys, go for it. It's stressful, it's headache, but if you can do it, go for it. So I would be using Nova Scotia as an example because why not? I'm in Nova Scotia and yeah. So how do you get the employers that are designated? So you can get it from the provincial website. So I would use Nova Scotia as an example. And yes, here you click on Nova Scotia and then you come, it brings you to the provincial website. For you to get that, you come to this part, come under higher, and then come under Atlantic Immigration Program. You click on it, and this is it. So page, on this landing page, you're going to get all the information that you. Anyways, for now, knock 62020, which is food service supervisor, they do not qualify under the AIP, but they qualify under the skilled worker stream, which is a PMP program for Nova Scotia. But yes, guys, read it, and then you can get the list of the designated employer. You can download the PDF file on here. If your employer is not designated and your employer would love to be designated so that they can, file for you, this is what the employer needs. So these are the forms, and then under here also you could also get the information on the um, employers that are eligible and the ones that are not eligible. So now, once you get a job offer, mm, let me give, so because I'm using my experience and how it applied to me. So for me, I got a job with a designated employer, but my employer's condition to before they can file for me is I have to pass the probation period. And the probation period for my company is 6 months. I also got a job with another designated employer, and the probation period for that employer was 3 months. So every employer has their own probation period. Next step is getting the documents ready. So, guys, like I said, documents are very important here. So, These are this is what we'll find on this page. Um, Start gathering your documents, your language test, your credential, your educational credential assessment, proof of funds, and all of this information you're getting on this page. And then I would be explaining how it all applied to me also. So for the document gathering, I already had my CELPIP because I did CELPIP, and um, I had I qualified based on the Canadian language benchmark. I had um, more than the benchmark that was required. Now, I also told you guys that I also had my WES because my master's was from outside of Canada, but I have a postgraduate certificate in Canada. So I presented both education, right? Now, for the proof of fund, for me, I did not provide any proof of fund because I already had a job. So this is it. It says if you're already living and working in Canada with a valid work permit, guys, do not forget that I told you that I was already on my postgraduate work permit. If you are already living and working in Canada with a valid work permit, you don't need to show a proof of fund. So, guys, I didn't show any proof of fund. Other documents that are required, you can check those documents on the checklist. But off the top of my head, I can remember that you need a police report, whether you're living in Canada or outside Canada, you need a police report for all the countries that you have stayed in or you have lived in that isn't Canada, and you have lived for more than 6 months. I don't know if you guys get that point. So if you're living in Canada, maybe you've been living in Canada for more than 6 months, you don't need a police report for Canada. However, if you've lived in Nigeria for more than 6 months within the last 10 years, or is it I think it's within the last 10 years or within the last 5 years, one of it, you need a police report. Now, if within that same period you've lived in Dubai, you've lived in UK, you've lived in Kafashan, wherever you've lived in for more than 6 months within a period of 10 years, which is not Canada, you need a police report from those countries. What other documents do you need? You may also need a reference letter from your employers that are outside of Canada, right? So if you're going through the work experience and you claim that you have the 1560 hours, you need a reference letter from your employer that shows that yes, you really worked those hours and all of that. Now, the next step is getting a settlement plan. This, guys, is also very easy. To get a settlement plan, they said if you're in Canada, you must work with the settlement provider organization in your region where you'll be working, right? So if you've gotten a job in Nova Scotia, if you've gotten a job in New Brunswick, wherever, you have to work with the settlement service provider. If you're outside Canada, you also have to work with the settlement service provider of the province that works with those outside of Canada. And you know, so if you need to find um, a settlement provider, you click on this page, and then this is it. Settlement service provider organizations for Canada, for candidates outside Canada. You click here. This is, you need to set. You can search. If, take for example, now you are in let me use Halifax for example, right? Or in Nova Scotia, right? This is it. So this is the settlement body. This is the settlement organization that you would work with, and online. They are online globally. Now, if you're in Canada, this is the one. You have different types. So for Nova Scotia, for Nova Scotia, look at it. You have, these are the people, so you can contact them. So for me, I contacted both ISANS, which is the Immigration Service Association of Nova Scotia. I contacted ISANS, and I also contacted the YMCA. So I got a closer date from the YMCA than I did for ISANS. So I went ahead with the settlement plan that was provided to me by YMCA. So this is how you, this is their information just in case you need to contact them. Now, I'm not going to leave out my French people from this. So if probably you're a French speaking person, you should also check if the provider can provide in French or not. So for Nova Scotia, these are the people that can provide in French. They are the only ones that can provide in French. So yes, once you have your settlements ready, what you need next is the endorsement letter. That's the certificate of endorsement. So for you to get the certificate of endorsement, it is actually your employer that will submit on your behalf to the province that you're in. Your employer submits on your behalf to the province that you're in. You just have to provide your employer with all these documents. So you see all of these documents, you gather them and then you submit it to your employer. Your employer goes through them. Both of you will do a lot of signing back and forth, and then they submit to the province on your behalf. Province assesses your documents and everything, and if they find you qualified, then you would get a certificate of endorsement. So this certificate of endorsement will be sent to your employer, and then your employer would forward it to you. That is how mine worked, right? So after you've gotten that certificate of endorsement, guys, you're going straight up to the PR portal. Straight up. So why I say this process, the only hiccup in this process, is getting a job with a designated employer. That is the only hiccup I can see, because getting a job could be a little bit tough because you have to work with the designated employers list. But once you get a job with a designated employer and your employer is willing to submit for you, to file for you, guys, you have no issues. Just get all your documents ready, and once you get all the documents ready, and everything that's required, you submit it to your employer. Your employer then submits on your behalf to the province. Then you get your endorsement letter. Once you get your endorsement letter, you are going straight to the PR portal. Unlike if it's the express entry. If it's the express entry, first you have to submit your your application, and then you'll be in the pool. Once you're in the pool, you have to wait for you to get an invitation to apply the ITA. Once you get that, then you now go and fill some of your informations on the site. They tell you to go and fill it. After you fill all of it, they'll see if you're eligible or anything, and then you go to the PR reporter before. Guys, you have boycott all this long process if you're going through the AIP, right? If you're going through the AIP, you boycott all of those process. And guys, yep. So you go to the portal. I'll just show us how the portal looks like. This is the portal, right? You see that it is different from the Express Entry portal. So you go to the portal, you create your account, and then you start to fill the forms that are required for you to fill out. You fill all of this one. So my next video, guys, I would try as much as possible to make a video on the step by step way on how to fill the form, because guys, this form is not a joke. If you make a mistake, hey god, it could make or may your application. So we have to be careful while filling the form. Now for me, I would also chip in one or two suggestion. I don't like saying it's an advice. I'll chip in one or two suggestion. And that is, if you start working with a designated employer, you get a job offer with a designated employer, and then you reach out to the DEI team or maybe the immigration team of the company, and they tell you what you need for them to submit for you. Guys, start filling this form. Just go to this place, create an account, and just be filling. You're not going to submit though, because you cannot submit without your endorsement letter, right? But just start filling the form, because guys, trust me, it is a lot. Because there's also a part where you have to fill your history of 10 years. Guys, we'll talk about that when I'm talking about how we can fill the form. But yes, guys, that is it. It's as simple as that. And that is how I got my own um um permanent residence in Canada.